one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore, where we are continuing antique uh, antique April.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going with a film that Tammy chose this time around. So, Tammy, what film are we going to be talking about tonight?
The 1933 original King Kong.
Okay. And do you know who directed it and starred in it?
Usually you help me out with that because I can't get into more than one screen.
Let's see. Merian.
Sure. Give me 1 second.
And Ernest B. Schoedsack. I've got it at the top of the discussion thing.
Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. I think it's Schoedsack. From 1933, with writers James Ashmore Creelman, Ruth Rose, and Merian C. Cooper, which appears to be one of the directors. So,
I did read that he was Cooper was fascinated since the age of 6, I believe, with gorillas after reading a book about Africa. So that's kind of where his idea came from. So, ever since he was a kid, he was fascinated with gorillas.
Well, we have a cast of Fay Wray as Anne Darrow, Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham, Bruce Cabot as Jack Driscoll, Frank Riker as Captain Englehorn, Sam Hardy as Charles Weston, Noble Johnson as Native Chief, Steve Clement as the Witch King, James Flavin as Second May Briggs, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the main characters in here. Did you want to take us into first impressions then, Tammy?
Okay, but the movie itself it's set as the filmmaker wants to make an he normally makes films with wild animals in them. He's known for his films, but the producers were telling him that he needs to have a female in his films, in his next film, for it to be a big seller. So he finds out about this island that supposedly nobody has been to, and it supposedly has things that you'll never see again, or people have not seen ever. So he's very secretive about going to the island and everything, and getting this whole crew together, and that's how this whole concept starts. And the island is called Skull Island, supposedly in the Indian Ocean, and he's hell bent on making a film that nobody has, with things that nobody has ever seen before. So, also I believe this is new to filmmaking because the stop motion is used in this film. If I'm right, it's kind of a new concept.
Yep.
Plus, the scale that things are made in here. You don't just go out and have a 60-foot gorilla. So, but yes, why don't we start with Brandon? Is this the first time you've seen this?
No, I have seen this multiple times over the years. I can't remember when I first watched it, but it's been a while. And even before then, I would see clips from the movie because it's very well known. It's practically in the public domain at this point, so you get to see clips of it all the time. It's it's a wonderful marvel of its age, I would like to think. So it's kind of cool to see from a filmmaking perspective, especially to see what they did back then and how well they executed some of the effects. So it's still a great movie to see to this day. I do agree that it is one of the major marvels of the time when it comes to movie making. And that is all I got to say about that.
Okay. How about you, Jake?
This is definitely not a first time viewing. I believe we covered this one at one point before, so I watched it for that. But I feel like I honestly can't remember the first time I saw it. I want to say, and I may be wrong about this, I want to say I saw the Peter Jackson version first. And I'm pretty sure I saw that in theaters, which it was. That's a movie that deserves to be seen on a large screen, no doubt about it. I was very impressed by it. I believe I did see that one first in part because I believe that when I did see this one, initially I was a bit underwhelmed. But things changed in the 72 years between the two films in terms of effects and that sort of thing. And they've changed even further since then. But this time around, I feel like I was able to, one, I kind of knew what, to expect as far as the effects. And you see, eventually it's impossible to fully judge it on what it was then because I wasn't around then. I can see how for audiences at the time it was cutting edge. And people over the years have definitely looked at this as like a classic film for, the effects, if nothing else. Jackson included. But I got more appreciation, I think, than I did before for the actual movie. Like, getting away from all the effects and stuff, the actual story they're telling and all that. I think it's pretty well done. And so basically it is a movie that's growing on me. It's impossible to look at it and not see some of the age, but it's definitely an enjoyable movie. And again, Tammy gets points for choosing the most antique movie for Antique April, so But yeah, I was happy to give this one another look. Yeah.
Well, I was taking your Antique April quite literally, so it was one of the first things that popped into my head. It's like, you want old? Okay, I could go old.
My backup was a choice that's even older than this one, but whatever. We got a good assortment regardless.
Okay, and David, how about you?
This is definitely not my first time watching the film. I cannot swear how many times that I've watched this, but I definitely seen this more than 5 times, if not 10, because this was a regular watch in my household. My grandfather, father Streggy, swore that he saw this in theaters as a double feature with Gunga Din. So I consider that kind of cool that he remembered that, and was a thing in his movie history that he would always tell me whenever we talked about movies. And having seen it that many times, honestly, this is the first time since the last time that I've actually sat back and been able to study it, and I see a lot more screens in the background of people when they're running from things, and definitely can tell the difference between when it's on an actual screen, but like if like when I was a kid, I remember seeing King Kong look like he was coming through the gate. Now, as an adult, I'm seeing the screen behind the gate where he comes up to like the screen, and for a brief second, you immediately see that he stops right before the gate, but to other people, it looked like he was coming through, and with those close-up shots of the gate and how big the gate was and stuff like that, and when that gate actually broke, which I'm sure we'll get into later. There were different things, like when he was getting mad and realizing that the Americans were has got his girl and all that jazz, and I look back at this movie and think that it's more of a romantic movie, but the one thing that I noticed this time around were all the different different sayings they would say about Beauty and the Beast. They would comment on that, and you could almost connect the Beauty and the Beast story to this in a sense. It's one that ends in sadness and bloodshed, So, but I enjoy this movie. This came out of the atomic era where people were scared of anything that was not normal, and a large size gorilla like this was something to behold. I mean, I like the story. I like the characters. Okay, yes, this movie was in black and white, but I could see how it could terrify the people of the 1950s.
Well, people nowadays, that hasn't changed. Anything that's not
Uh,
normal, scared of.
And the 1930s, actually, because that was end of the Roaring 20s and into the 30s, where crime was like a big syndicate then, bootlegging and all that jazz.
I could definitely see this picking up again in the 50s with that. But yeah, this thing hit in the smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression, which that's I'd say that people were looking for whatever they could to get their minds off of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, is anything else, David?
Nope. I think it's pretty much it for me at this moment. I mean, I didn't really fully connect Beauty and the Beast until I heard it like several times, like uh, over the span of the film. It was like 2 or 3 times that they mentioned Beauty and the Beast.
Oh yeah.
Things like
Well,
that.
and just
And that's
a couple.
candy line.
When we did Sleeper, I mentioned that list I saw recently of famous final lines, and I said Sleeper should have been on the list. Well, this movie was like Carl Denham's last line. It was "Beauty that killed the beast" is one of the most quoted final lines in movie history.
Oh yeah, it is definitely an amazing final line.
Yeah.
Not as good as the as picking up the pieces, that last line, but
But a few more people saw this movie.
just a few.
But yeah, so I think. What about you, Tammy? When was it that you first saw this movie? I know this isn't your first time watch.
No, I mean, I do know. I watched it with my father, but I know that he did not introduce me to this when I was a kid, and I'd be by my great grandparents, and you know, I go on especially on the weekend. I go to bed, and they go to bed, and then I get up and I go out and I watch the late night monster movie. See, and so I know I saw this the first time on my own as a kid. Because like I said, they'd have late night monster movies on. But I do know I did watch it with my father, but he's not the one who introduced me to it. But at the time when I was a kid, I loved getting up and watching those late night monster movies, and that's how I saw Godzilla the first time, and saw this one, and you know all that, and I just I just thought it was totally cool, and as a kid, I didn't know anything about film or actors or even like what we're talking about we'll talk about today, and like the whole how this film was made and the whole concept, for filming, um that it was kind of new at the time how they filmed this. I didn't know any of that stuff then as a kid. I just was I was like, wow, cool, big monkey, So I mean, as I've gotten older, I've you know learned to appreciate the film even more from not just the storyline, because being a kid, you don't understand that part either. Really, you just, like I said, look at it as a cool monster movie. But I've come to appreciate the storyline, the whole filming concept behind it. We're in this day and age, we got all the technology and this and all that, to sit back here and look at this and realize how they made this, and it gives you a lot of appreciation for people's imagination at the time. And I think that's something that now I really, really, that's something I really, really like about this film is, you know, they didn't have what we have now. And to come up with what they did and how they filmed it and all that, it just, to me, that's what film is really about, is your imagination. And the imagination it took to create this and to make it come together. You don't just hit a button, you know. There was work involved in this, and thought and ideas and everything else, and that's what part of the reason I chose this, is because of, as old as it is, you get to see all that in here. And it's just it's, it just fascinates me how much people actually used their imagination at one time. So, I mean, not that they don't use it now, but they had to use it a lot more then because you couldn't just push a button and and make a monster appear.
Well, no. A lot of what happens with stop motion animation is a lot of still photos
Yeah.
uh, ended up being drawn on paper by artists, and then they've got to make them like move ever so slightly through like tons of flip pages, you know.
Well, kind of like
No. Stop motion. It's models. There's a whole lot more involved than just than that. But yeah,
Well, that's
like
I've
me
said,
how
like
it
I've
first
cartoons.
said,
started.
I've said
So.
before, I'm a huge fan of stop motion. I have tremendous respect for those people. Now, I should say, in fairness, modern visual effects is not just pushing a button. It's more involved than that. But I see what you're saying, though, that like this is a whole other level of skill and devotion to the art.
Correct.
Well, yeah, I didn't mean quite literally they push a button, but it's not. It doesn't.
I mean,
It takes a
it's
lot. It
films.
costs a lot more to make it happen. Back then than it does now. You know.
Right.
Even Ray Harryhausen. Oh, let's add dust. Even Ray Harryhausen has said that he looks up to King Kong as like an inspiration
Right.
to his many various efforts that he's put into film as well. So, Dustin, did was this a first time watch for you for King Kong?
No, I've seen King Kong a good number of times at this point. I think I first saw it when I was really starting to explore movies like in a more serious way, and it was something that was available from the library. So I just went and picked it up, and they had a pretty good copy of it. Came with a fairly long documentary about it. I didn't have access to that this time, but I remembered some stuff from it, like for example, like the lost spider pit sequence, which the Peter Jackson King Kong managed to include, and apparently it was so easy to kind of recreate that they just sort of did it with miniatures, and it's something that can be reinserted into some versions of the film that you can watch. And it's pretty it blends pretty well. Like, you don't necessarily realize it's modern footage.
I almost forgot about that lost spider footage. It's not always mentioned when people talk about King Kong. So glad you brought that up.
But anyway, so King Kong is still a pretty solid movie, even if some of it may feel a little, I don't know, maybe dated now. Especially some of the stereotypes when they get to the island, but I'm sure we'll discuss that. But for the most part, it really does hold up very well, and it's still a pretty good movie.
I agree.
No, Brendan, talk about that, huh?
So, Tammy, did you want to bring us into the plot a little bit?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it before we started the first impressions, but yes, you have a filmmaker that he's known for his films usually featuring wild animals, and he wants he was told by the producers that in order to make this one a hit, he needs to incorporate a female into it. So he he that's where Anne comes in because nobody he wasn't his other people that help him were not able to find one, and he went out on his own to find a female actress. And um, he's been very secretive to everybody about where they're going, what this is going to be about, and everything, because I don't think he truthfully himself knows exactly what to expect. He just knows that he's got this map, that this island is supposed to have been, that the people on the island are still, um, they're not up with society. That they still do they're, for lack of a better word, primitive. They're still primitive. And that's all he knows, and that he anticipates that there's going to be things that you have not seen, that the world has not seen, or anything.
That's what he does know. That what has his interest is not the primitives. It's that they worship a godlike being. He knows the name of the being. He has no idea what it is. But he's like, this could be. He knows it's something he wants to get on film.
Right. Yeah.
Like he knows about Kong, but he doesn't know that Kong's. He knows there's some giant creature that will definitely like make him money if he is able to capture and exhibit it.
Right.
He just doesn't know the specifics.
Right.
And I know he's trying to keep it even secretive from the captain and the producers and everyone that's involved behind, because he doesn't want to get ahead of himself if he's wrong. So but when in the very beginning he's strictly told, okay, you have to have a female.
Well, the way he explained it, or the way I heard him explain it, is that he's told, "Hey, your movies are fine, but you're going to make so much more if you have a love interest." Like, he is a successful director, but he is told, or he hears again and again, "Oh, if only there was a love interest, it would appeal to more people," or and he's like, "Fine, I'll give them what they want." But and I know part of the reason he's so secretive, yes, he doesn't want to look like a fool if it's a wild goose chase, and that's probably the biggest reason. But the difficulty he has getting an actress underscores one of the other reasons, and that is if he gives too much information, everyone's going to run for cover, and he won't have anyone to go with him.
Yeah.
It has to be kind of a secret. And he's trying to. The other problem he had was that he was trying to be like, "Hey, I need an actress for this role. Like, we're going to be shooting like on location." It's like, well, everybody knows you go to jungles and like really dangerous places. What exactly are you doing there? It's like, I don't want to say. It's like, well, we're not sending anybody with you unless you tell us where you're going and what you're doing. And so he basically just grabs Anne because she's available and she's not really asking questions. Like, she just needs work like bad enough.
She's
like, oh, okay.
Literally a starving artist.
Well,
come with me. We're going to film Cannibal Holocaust.
No, it's more like come with me if you want to eat.
He's got the captain, everybody wondering because he's got those smoke bombs or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you like? What do you think you're going to find that you actually need these for?
He brings all those munitions, yeah.
And they say he brings way too many people for the ship, so it's kind of like maybe you're bringing along spares.
And he brings like a small like military force, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's right too. Like, I think a good amount of the crew like does die on there. It's not. You don't get I guess like a really good like body count of this. Well, you do, but it's kind of hard to tell how many people like have died on the island because the action is kind of choppy here and there. Like we see a sauropod eat like 2 dudes, which would not happen. Sauropods probably would not do that.
Well,
being
you cannot count how many natives that King Kong actually ends up either eating or just completely crushing in his hands.
Well, he's got to have something at midnight. You get up, you get a little bit of, get a little hungry.
One reason why it's difficult to know how many people get killed, and I don't know if y'all had the same read on this, but I kind of saw it as it was a cost-saving measure for the movie, I think. But I feel like they probably had far fewer actual people working on the film than were supposed to be in the crew. I think there were probably some extras who were reused, because you notice you never really see a lot of people at once, except maybe in the native village you see a lot of people. And I think that they, as far as the ship's crew, they probably just skimped on how many people they wanted to pay for the roles. So you never really saw the whole crew on camera, I thought. So that makes it harder to see how many people actually were lost too.
Right, the crew, you only see maybe a half a dozen at a time,
Yeah.
for this shot and then for that shot, I see what you're saying. In later films you see more, but yeah, I think the most you see of the crew is actually when they first get there, and when they first start come onto the actual
Deployed.
island,
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest amount of the crew that you actually see.
Like the party that walks up to the natives on the island. I know that I kept thinking to myself, I wonder how many shots it took for them to not trip on each other's feet. Because they were walking like pretty close to each other. I probably would have tripped on someone's heel or something like that on the way. But yeah, so whereabouts are we, Tammy?
I'd say we're to the part where they're actually getting to the island, and he's starting to divulge a little bit more about where they're going and everything, because and then that's when the mysteries start to unfold. You got the fog, and they can start hearing the drums, and and then they finally do embark onto the island, and they follow the sound of the drums, and
there
is a scene that I think Jake was probably going to mention it too.
There's a notable scene before he actually spills it to the captain and the first mate that I think is worth mentioning. That's where he's doing a so-called screen test with Anne, and he asks her to look up further, and then he tells her to scream. And at that point, Jack's like, I wonder what he thinks we're going to see there.
Honestly, I really like that line. It's very ominous. It's like, what is he think he's going to see?
And honestly, I think that was kind of breaking the fourth wall just a little bit because this is how you prepare an actress or an actor into a scene. And I think that's one thing that's always mentioned.
Yeah, I don't think any one of us can forget like that notable very first stream.
It's pretty well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very guttural.
Yeah. It's also worth mentioning, I think, that that Anne and the first mate, Jack, they get off on the wrong foot in such a way that not only are they both young and attractive, but they get on such a wrong foot. You're like, okay, they're going to end up together by the end of the movie if they survive. So,
But
yeah,
he actually ends up like telling her that that he loves her, like even before they get to the island. So,
but in the very same conversation where he once again said she was basically a waste of space,
well, you could definitely tell he hated women at that moment.
Well, I mean, one thing I find kind of curious, and I think Dustin mentioned earlier that things have changed since this movie came out. Definitely, Jack in particular says some things that are very, very dismissive of women generally. One thing that's weird, though, is if they wanted to play that card, they could have leaned hard into the sailor superstitions about women being on a boat, but they really didn't do that. It just came off more as Jack just being kind of a chauvinist pig.
Well, I think that leans into the fact that this movie was done under pre-code Hollywood,
Right.
if I remember correctly. So there were a lot of things that they could get away with in that period of pre-code.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it would make perfect sense narratively with the long tradition of you can't have a woman on the boat, it'll bring bad luck. It's just kind of weird that they never really leaned into that at all in the movie.
They didn't say that was what it was. Yeah, but they didn't say that was what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I caught that, and it felt like they were implying that without really saying that. Like, I personally got that read off of it.
Okay.
So, because the sales, it's like, oh, women on board a ship, and so it's like, oh, okay, yeah. But they didn't say specifically, this is the old superstition. They just kind of, a lot of times, older movies just sort of expected you to know certain things.
Yeah.
So that's more what I took from kind of that attitude that he was copping.
Well, when I was a kid and I saw this the first time, I didn't understand really all that kind of stuff. But then when I got older, I did, because some of the movies that I had started watching and stuff had that that concept in about women, not that it's taboo for women to be on a ship. It's bad luck. It's this, it's that.
Women are a distraction on board if they're on a ship, especially if you have any kind of military or sailor men or what,
Pirate movies were good for that too. That was taboo. It was bad luck. To have a woman on board. So.
Whereas the island folk were, she is exactly the type of woman that they are looking for.
Right, because she's fair-skinned and she's blonde. So she's nothing like anything they've seen before, or, she's not like any of the women they have, so they think that she will definitely make the perfect sacrifice.
Yeah, she's the same color as a banana.
Oh man, yeah, the banana.
So what do you guys think when the natives actually realize that they're being watched by the crew, and the head of the natives wants to trade, what is it, 3 of his women for
Six.
her.
It was six. It was I just saw a video on this the other day. I've been watching a lot of just kind of random stuff about like dinosaur movies, and King Kong comes up because this does have some dinosaurs in it. And there was some talk about how that sort of played into like racial stereotypes like of the period. And it's like, oh, they buy and sell women over there, you know. And there was a pretty interesting argument too that Kong himself is sort of like, what's the best way to put this? Sort of like taken from where he lives and like brought back to like America, and it's, I think you get where the essay was going with that. But it was kind of, the natives are very stereotypical, like especially for like the period. Let's just say that. And it was kind of like,
In a way, the natives are no different than what the movie. They're stereotypical as to, okay, they want her to sacrifice to Kong because she's something different than what's there, and then what do the filmmakers
and then take Kong back, and
they're going to take Kong back
too
as the 8th wonder of the world, because this is something nobody's ever seen before. So in a way, both sides are playing on this never seen before thing, you know?
Right.
True. I can see where you're going with that. But you know, ultimately, what happens is they end up getting to the island, and of course, the natives want her. They refuse to give her up because I believe it's the captain of the ship that is translating everything. Like, he knows their lingo, you know. And
Well,
they
he
end up.
knows the lingo. He's trying to translate the best he can.
Well, yeah, he like only half knows it, so it's gonna like knowing broken English, except it's broken native language.
And he knows
But
well enough that he knows that, yep, he wants her for 3 of his, okay?
so, but they end up going back to the ship, and I think that's when we get the skipper saying in his country voice that he kind of loves her, and he gets called in by the captain and goes over a map or whatnot. And meanwhile, that is happening. The natives end up rowing their way away to the ship in the dark and kidnapping her and bringing her back to the island. And around this time, that's when they start seeing the fire and the torches, and that's when the producer director guy, he's like, I wish I could be on the island so that I could tape this, get this on camera. And that's when they're like, okay, where's the girl, you know, where is she? And she's not in her cabin, she's not on board. So that and I believe it's the cabin boy or cabin man that notices a necklace that is on the floor, and he's like, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. And he's like, I found this, captain, you know. So that's when they were alerted that, you know, someone had been here, and the female was missing.
It must be mentioned that the cook Charlie also feels a little off nowadays.
Oh, the typical Chinese man.
Yeah, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah,
They,
like busted English.
yeah, they played that one up a little into the stereotypes there.
Okay. But yeah, they did play into that a little bit there, but it works for I guess what they needed for that. Um,
I
I
mean,
suppose.
it because it's the time period. I don't know if it necessarily like works because it kind of like snaps you out of it if you watch the movie today because it's like, wait, what? Why is he talking like that? And then you have to take a minute to be like, oh yeah, right. What the fuck? So I personally found it kind of annoying.
Well, in any case, after that moment, I believe that they begin to gather their way to the island. And Tammy, did you want to take it up from here?
Yeah, before I do, I just want to say that, every time I watch this, I think about the first time I watched it as a kid. And the from a kid's point of view, the awe of, oh, look at that big monster, look at the big, because the kid doesn't think about all the things that we're talking about and discussing right now. And we now as adults appreciate a lot of things that go along with this movie and see a lot of different things and everything with the story. But I try and when I watch this, try and remember what it was like from a kid's point of view, seeing this the very first time. And um, so a kid doesn't think about like what we were just discussing with the cook, you know, and things like that. It's
And I'll admit, this is one I kind of wish I had gotten to see as a kid because I could see how if you grew up, this is a very good example of a movie that if you grew up with it, it would hit you a whole different way than coming to it later. No doubt about it. Like I said, it does grow on you. So, like, even coming to it as an adult, it kind of grows on you with the repeat viewings. But it would be kind of interesting to have had that experience of seeing it when you were quite young.
It's still a great movie. I just thought it was interesting that how like it really sucks you in and you almost don't notice this stuff unless somebody else points it out first. And then when you have that perspective, you're suddenly like, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, what the? So I had noticed that myself because when I first saw it, like I wasn't really, looking out for that kind of thing. And I wasn't very aware of just how many things like of its time period were really stuck in there. Especially like with regards to just attitudes about like colonialism and like natives in general.
Well, it's in a way, it's a time capsule. So you can look back on it and see what society was like for good and ill. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that stuff like that is in these movies because no one can really look back at those times and sugarcoat it as easily. You can look back and say, nah. Things were as bad as that back then. Here you can see these examples in popular media. And at the same time, I take it with a grain of salt, like it is. I might roll my eyes at those depictions, or a Charlie Chan movie, for instance. I'll definitely roll my eyes at that. But I will, but at the same time, I'm not going to say, man, that should never have been made. It would be hard for me to have made that argument back in those days to those same producers that were doing it.
Right.
So it's
I wouldn't make that argument really either. It's just kind of like awareness now that we're in modern times.
Yeah, I think it's good to be aware of it, but at the same time, it's more of a It's more of, like I say, I look at it as a time capsule.
And there's a number of ways in which it is the science too. I mean, you see a movie like this, you don't expect it to necessarily be all about the science, but I think Dustin already touched on this. The depictions of the various dinosaurs,
They're really bad.
they were really bad. And yes, a sauropod or a stegosaurus rampantly attacking humans to try to eat them. No, that wouldn't have.
Hey, I grew up at a time where a cartoon dinosaur was playing an electric guitar with his teenage friends. I can say that, that nobody really appreciates the science.
Or the one where you got what is a blue collar worker with a.
I suppose it's better than reusing the stock footage from the giant Gila monster, like they did in Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Well, Giant Gila Monster was like maybe almost 30 years after this. I mean, because King Kong, you got to remember too, King Kong is one of the very first movies where this was really done. I mean, I think previously it was like The Lost World, 1925. Like, it was like a silent movie. And if you're talking about Willis O'Brien and Harryhausen, I think Harryhausen was inspired by this, as well as like a lot of other like effects people.
Yep.
Didn't Harryhausen work under O'Brien, like apprentice with him or something?
Believe so, yes.
So this was really like a big influential movie for, I mean, movies only recently had gotten sound when this had come out. So it was like a big technical achievement.
Because it wasn't that far removed from when Dracula came out, like a couple years before that through Universal. So
it was 31, right?
I believe it was 1931 that was direct, at least the Spanish Dracula, I believe, and then 1932 for, I believe, Dracula. Can be
I
mistaken.
think that was 31, wasn't it?
Let's see. Let's look it up. Dracula. It's 1931.
Okay, yeah, right.
So, and from what I remember, that was an earlier one. It went into the speakies, the soundies, talkies. There we go. That was the word I was looking for. But yeah,
You say speakeasy, I think speakeasy, and which is appropriate for the time period.
Yes.
Yeah. I was trying to come up with the word. I knew it. It was in my vocabulary. I just couldn't spit it out. But yeah. Let's see. Where are we? So
Anne has been kidnapped by the natives, and they are tying her up to offer her to Kong, which is our probably big memorable moment throughout history from the movie, where we first see like King Kong and like Anne's tied to like the ropes and stuff. Like even now looking at it, King Kong himself is pretty convincing in that shot. Like it's really impressive because it's like, I know that is a model. Like I have seen like pictures of how they did that. Like I could probably, if I spend an hour or two like looking up like reference, do that myself if I really like had the supplies for it. And still, Kong looks so good and so believable in that scene. Like it is really kind of amazing.
And again, that's one of those moments where if you don't know right away and you're seeing it for the first time, it is very believable. But now that I've seen the film for countless times, I realize that's Kong as a model on a screen behind where she is up there Prometheus bound, So it's
it does kind of give it away if you like look at it. But otherwise, man, it's pretty good.
But yeah, it's an interesting technique, and I think for audiences of the time and those who like to just sit back and watch it, it's okay for those kinds of people. But there are those that will pick it apart and be like, "That's fake as fuck," you know. So, so I guess it's up to the audience exactly how they interpret it. So, yeah, that is a very intense scene, and he literally grabs her and like shakes her around like she's a rag doll, you know, or at least you think it's her. But I know there's definitely a moment where she is also stop motion character. It's the only way that they could have done it back then in order to make us feel like he was carrying her off to the great beyond, you know. So, Tammy,
Right.
did you want to take it from here?
Okay, so he shows up and he takes her, and so now the the crew is just in awe because now they finally know what Kong is. But now they've got to try and get her back. So that's where we go as they're going through the jungle to try and get her back, and then you're encountering the other animals.
I would say creatures and creatures in the landscape.
Creatures of the night and day.
I mean, they're pretty clearly like supposed to be dinosaurs, even though they're mostly pretty cruddy looking dinosaurs. Although, to be fair, they look pretty good for like the time period. But knowing what we know now about dinosaurs, like the T-Rex stands all wrong, but that wasn't fixed for a very, very, very long time. So I think it's kind of fair.
33, those look really good.
Look good. And one thing I like too is they have, when the animal's just kind of milling around, it's not static. It just like scratches its jaw and it's like looking around. Like it looks kind of lifelike. Like it's not just like in the background. You know what I mean? So, and I appreciated that.
Oh, and you see it as a kid the first time, the dinosaurs and everything look pretty cool, but that's why I said every time I watch this, I try and think back then instead of everything that you know now about it. I try to go back to when I first saw it as a kid.
See, when I saw what I saw as a kid, I would have to look at it in the context of the Muppet Babies.
They did have a lot of cool clips on that show.
Yes.
Wasn't there a cartoon at the time called Captain Caveman?
Yeah.
Would that be 70s, I guess? Maybe
that was
70s.
Hanna-Barbera. Hanna-Barbera in the 1970s. Captain Caveman. Yeah.
I just seem to remember bits and pieces about the idea of him bonking the dinosaurs over the head with his club. And
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, he had the magic club and he could fly with it.
yeah. I don't remember.
Was it Excalibur?
I don't know what made me think of that, but it's like I just remember now that was just like thinking back. It's like that was just so off the wall. And it's, Captain Cave, man. It's just like, oh, I really watched that, really.
Well, hey, it was the same voice actor that did a lot of the Looney Tunes that you know and love. Also weird.
Well, there was a Kong animated series in the late 2000s, if you wanted to talk cartoons. But yeah,
So wasn't there like a Hanna-Barbera one too, or maybe I'm thinking of the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla?
I mean, even at this day and age, it's amazing how things have changed. I mean, even Jurassic Park, that science is definitely off from where it is now.
Oh yeah,
Still looks good, but
they were moving in the right direction. But Jurassic Park was actually based on what at the time was fairly new science, and
like I say, it's hard to say. I mean, we would look at movies, let's say 30 years from now, if some of us are still kicking with this channel. I don't know whether it will or not. We could come back to movies that are actually considered politically correct and awesome today and find terrible faults and offenses with it 30 years from now. I'd even be one to bet
5 years from now.
Oh, and scientific inaccuracies as well. But it's just how it is in the times. I mean, we all live in the present time. We can only think in the present mindset. I don't have a time machine to go back to 1933 to absorb that culture. Nor would I want to, actually. 1933 in the United States would not be a very pleasant place to live.
Like even probably 1980 United States probably wouldn't be that great.
Oh, I wouldn't want to go back there at all, and I lived in it.
The movies make it look pretty fun, but like when you think it's like no internet, like cell phones.
that was when Motorola's were in the cars all the time.
Everybody was smoking everywhere, and there were cigarette vending machines everywhere.
I thought the 1980s were pretty good. I'm sorry.
Hey, there are people.
Few things about modern day that you would be like, shit, I forgot I needed that. Like if you went back to the 80s, though, like that's more what I'm referring to.
80s, we had arcades like that were tremendously fun.
Tab is the thing that represents the 80s the best.
Oh, Tab soda?
Yep, Tab represents the 80s the best.
That was my mom's soda choice. She loved Tab.
A truly disgusting tasting soda, for me anyway.
No, I think Dr. Graf's came from the 80s.
Wasn't there one of these King Kong adaptations from the 80s as well?
Yeah, there was Dino De Laurentiis did his own King Kong in it was actually in the 70s, and then King Kong Lives was the sequel to that. I think that was the 80s. And honestly, actually okay. People like to kind of dump on it, but it was fine.
Oh yeah, and then you got to talk about the spin-offs to Kong, like Konga and Kong Island and Mighty Joe Young.
Mighty Joe Young.
The original and the remake.
So I guess we're at the point where Kong kind of saves the girl from the monsters, or have we even gotten that far yet?
We're basically there.
She's about to be carried off by Kong. I mean, we were talking about like the technical triumph of Kong just as an effect.
But yes, you're right. He does end up saving her from the monsters.
Hey, they have a good relationship together.
Skull Island is a pretty unsafe place. But this is something I noticed like a little later in the film. It's like there are all these dangerous creatures everywhere, and Kong is clearly like the strongest animal there, and the other animals should know it. So why is everything in the forest attacking him like it's fucking Doom?
They're not. They're attacking her. But it's like he's not far away. He's no more than a few steps away. It's like he turns his back and suddenly these creatures are coming in. And it's like, yeah, you would think they'd know better.
Giant snakes pouring out of the walls. Yeah.
It's the whole concept. He's the king. So yes, they're gonna try and overthrow the king.
Good to you, the king.
So
You idiots! There will be a king. No, but in any case, so they end up journeying into the landscape, coming across various creatures along the way, and of course, there is that instant moment that where King Kong battles a snake, or what is considered to be the anaconda of the time. And he definitely battles the Allosaurus, and there's definitely a Stegosaurus in there somewhere. And of course, King Kong brings the girl to his parent lair, and she's screaming part of the time because he's just keeps on picking her up and dropping her down, or this and that. And
I have to make a quick
he kind of
comment
just
on that.
looks at her.
I have to make a quick
Go
comment
ahead.
on that Stegosaurus. It is like, what do you think, Jake? Like 5 times bigger than it probably ever should have been.
Which
Like,
one?
it is the Stegosaurus that they walk in front of, and it's like a freaking Dreadnoughtus sized.
It's hard for me to judge with this one with the sizes, and I feel like it was maybe a little bigger than it needed to be. Like I said, it was far more aggressive.
This is the meat-eating variety.
Yes, this is a Metasaurus.
Its head was the size of like 2 or 3 of those dudes. Which
Yeah, it was a good size head. Yeah,
Mosasaurus itself did not, like Tylosaurus, like did not get that big, and it had like one of the biggest heads like I know of from prehistoric creatures. So, and that's not a small animal. That's like a 50-some foot animal. So, like seeing that, it was just like, geez. It's like 1998 Godzilla Stegosaurus.
Well, and there is a pterosaur that ends up trying to take Fay Ray's character up into the air, but is for naught because King Kong saves her from it. And about that time, that's when Lover Boy ends up showing up, and saving her from that. And that's when they end up taking and trying to do the long trek back. And Tammy, did you want to take it from here? Do you remember what happens around this time?
I'm trying.
Okay.
Sorry,
Well, I'll continue.
my brain's-
Their trek back through the jungle is a little faster than their trek out into the landscape. In fact, I swear to God, while she was running through the jungle, her dress slipped just a little bit. But they got back to the gate, got back inside. They had a moment of scrambling to get the gate back shut. They put the wooden thing back in. They banged the big symbol which brought the natives back out, and basically everyone on set evidently was trying to keep the door closed, but Kong's humongous strength broke through, and they ended up were running to the boats to get back to the ship. And
So I had a question this sequence.
Yeah.
And I wonder if anyone else was thinking this. Denham made reference to the smoke bombs. He said to make sure we had them and all this stuff. You'd think they would have thought to use them when Kong was pounding at the door, at the gate, rather than waiting. Did they? I did not catch whether they had them with them or whether they were at the people at the ship had them. I don't know if y'all caught one way or the other. But if they had them with them, why the hell didn't they use them at the gate?
Well, there's a good amount of probably holes you can find like that in this. I think the best example of that is so I had this pointed out to me by Robot Chicken before I had actually seen King Kong. Like this was in the mid 2000s. Like they did a King Kong sketch where like this explorer is like on the island, like he's on the other side of the wall with like the natives, and he's like, what's the point of this wall? I mean, isn't Kong a giant gorilla? Like, couldn't he just climb right over this? And the native guy is like, shh, like, waving his hands and like making like the shush motion. And then it cuts to like the other side of the wall. King Kong has his ear up against the wall, and he's like, huh, and he's like nodding his head.
I might have seen that, yeah.
And then it's like, and also like, why would Kong be the last of his species? I mean, there'd have to be a population to sustain them. The giant gorillas, I mean, there wouldn't be just one. And like King Kong is still nodding his head like, huh. And it cuts away to like some other sketches. And then it cuts back to the same sketch, and they're just giant gorillas pouring over the wall, like into the village, as like the villagers like panic. And the guy is still standing there. And furthermore, wouldn't also, and then it cuts away as like the chief goes to like try and strangle him to like make him stop giving King Kong ideas. There are just like dozens of giant gorillas like leaping over the wall in the background. And
Good
like,
times.
that made me laugh so hard. Like it still does, just the memory of it.
I think I did see that. Now, am I remembering correctly? I feel like they addressed the one-of-a-kind issue in Kong Skull Island, but I cannot for the life of me remember.
They did. They in Skull Island, like the Monsterverse one, like Kong was part of like a larger population of giant apes. But he's the last one on the island. Like his family was killed by some stronger monsters when he was basically a child. And so now he's grown up, but he's the last of his kind on Skull Island. So that's a big part of the newest like Godzilla X Kong is that he finds the other giant apes.
Oh, I need to see that eventually.
Yeah, there's like a whole civilization of giant apes in the Hollow Earth. It's pretty rad. Like it's kind of a dumb movie, but it's, well, let's put it this way. It's more of a Final Wars sort of Godzilla movie rather than a Shin Godzilla sort of Godzilla movie.
See, what we need is the little King Kong versus Godzuki.
People are kind of hoping we do get like something like that soon because like it's not technically King Kong's son, but there is like a little Kong in this who is helpful to the story. So people are hoping we get that next. But anyway, back to 1930s King Kong, where now our Carl Denham and our heroes are off to try and rescue Anne while all this is going on, and they just get torn up by the jungle pretty much. Like they run into like the big carnivorous herbivore dinosaurs. They run into they have to get into a raft at some point. get nailed by the freaking, I think it's a Brontosaurus, which sort of ties into the old perception of Brontosaurus as something that would just hang out in water to support its weight, or whatever stupid theory that was, honestly.
That's about right. Yeah.
And for a while, I actually thought it was like a plesiosaur that was attacking them, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then it got out of the water, and walked around on legs, and I was like, "Wait, what? Oh man!"
Yeah.
I saw something called Loch Ness Horror from 1982 the other day, and that was, it had really bad IMDb ratings. It was actually kind of okay. Like, there was some really horrific shit in there. It's like, imagine you're camping on the shore of a lake, like you're sleeping in your sleeping bag, there aren't dangerous animals known to be in the area or whatever, and you wake up and just Loch Ness Monster is in front of you, and it starts pulling your sleeping bag into the water, but you're stuck and you can't get out, and it just drags you under. That was it was kind of cruddily done because of the effects, but just the idea was so horrendous. Just oh my god!
Just give it 350.
Actually, I think when they later did Amazon Women on the Moon or whatever weird sketch film that used just random stuff, the Loch Ness Monster was Jack the Ripper, the little sequence. I think they actually used the same animatronic from this movie, because it looked exactly the same. It had the little tiny ear things and everything. I think they just broke it out of storage and put a hat on it. So I learned something there. It also looked quite a lot like the dinosaur from Beatty, Secret of the Lost Legend, which was one of the very first movies I ever saw, period. We had it on beta cassette. And I love that damn movie. So.
It is a classic.
It rocks. Oh, it's so fun. Is it kind of dumb? Yeah. Does it matter? Absolutely not. It's so good. Surprisingly violent and suggestive, too. I saw it again a few years ago, and I was like, damn. So, anyway. So, after our crew is kind of eaten by spiders, which is excised from film, they do eventually run into Kong as he's saving Anne from just this hordes of creatures. And actually, the spider pit sequence is from where he pitches that log that they're on into the canyon. That's where that's supposed to be. And then I think that's when we have he thinks Jack is still alive, and he's kind of looking for Jack. Jack is hiding in a cave under that outcropping. And then he eventually has to go. Kong has to leave Jack and fight the Tyrannosaur, I think, right? In that moment.
Yeah. He hears his ain true love screaming and goes to save her.
So, Tammy, did you want to bring us?
Well, yeah, Kong breaks through and the wall, and like you guys said, they didn't use the smoke bombs at this time, but it isn't until they're trying to get back to the ship that all of a sudden it's oh wow, we got these things. Hey, wouldn't it be cool to bring him back with us? So that's when the light bulb goes off in the director's head about, yeah, that would be kind of cool. And just think, Kong, the eighth wonder of the world, is where the concept of that comes in. And basically we go from that scene of them, and then we're now back in the States.
Yep.
And,
and you get some couple commenting on, or at least a guy was speaking to his female companion, and he was like, "Hey, I got these tickets for $20." And I'm thinking to myself, like tickets were only $20 then.
$20 for the pair. But yeah, at that time,
That was a lot.
the
That'd be expensive tickets.
I was going to say the movie itself probably would have cost people around. I think IMDb said it was 35 cents. Basically, $10 a pop. That's like a show. That's like this concert that I'm wanting to see this summer with Willie Nelson, Bob Dylan, John Mellencamp, Robert Plant, and Alison Krauss. That sort of lineup you would expect to have cost a similar price in 1933 wages. You know what I mean? Like, this is $10 a person.
Damn!
It's huge.
I just looked it up. That's $480 today.
Yeah.
And during the Great Depression.
Yeah. That's a lot of money. And it was not like, oh, I got these. It was like, she was saying something like, oh, I'm not really feeling this or something like that. He's like, oh, I'm out 20 bucks. He's like, you better enjoy it.
Your week's pay, like probably more. Jeez.
I was gonna say, in a week, people were making like $5 and $6 maybe.
Yeah, that's a lot more than a week's pay for most people. Even again, if we're doing conversions from today's rates, but definitely during the Depression.
Well, you could tell some of these people were like the upper society, and this
Yeah.
this I
Yeah.
spent this
The
much
snooty
money on
crowd.
it. Yes.
Average price of labor was 45 cents an hour in 1933.
Wow.
There
Yeah.
was no minimum wage. Like, it had just been signed into law, but it sounds like it was not allowed to go into effect until a few years later. Wow. The minimum wage in 1938 was 25 cents an hour. So that gives you a real dang. I thought it would be expensive, but I didn't quite realize it would be that intense.
But yeah, once the audience got into the theater, he had that big speech about the eighth wonder of the world again. Well, not again, but it was a pretty cool speech.
I think this is where we get another reference about Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Well, like one of the media folks says something about it, and Denham latches onto it. It's like, yeah, go with that angle. Use that, He's all excitable about it.
Well, he is a showman, and it is a good tagline too. I mean, especially at that time when this sort of thing was probably really being invented in the way we would to be like how we would understand it today.
Indeed.
Yeah, and then he gets to be the showman for an audience. What am I trying to say? He goes out there, to introduce it and everything. And let's see here. And now, ladies and gentlemen, before I tell you any more, I'm going to show you the greatest thing your eyes have ever beheld. He was a king and a god in the world he knew. And now he comes to civilization merely a captive, a show to gratify your curiosity. And he says, ladies and gentlemen, look at Kong, the eighth wonder of the world. And so that speech, it shows him as the showman. But it also underscores a simple thing about Carl Denham, which Robert Armstrong does a great job with this character. And I love the spin Jack Black put on it in the Peter. But Denham is a born showman, and he's also a rotten ass, greedy bastard with no heart and no soul.
Yep.
And he is willing to do anything for the spectacle and the fame and the money. And this whole sequence of him putting Kong on in New York is just the crowning moment of that, basically.
I'm going to chain him up and poke him with sticks. It's pretty much his plan.
Yep.
And it's like, seems unwise. Like, you don't know how strong this thing is or what it's really capable of.
I could hear more than one person involved in this. Seemed like a good idea at the time.
What they don't understand either is how he really feels about Anne, and that's basically when all hell breaks loose, is because Kong thinks that the photographers and everybody are hurting her, and that's when he breaks loose, because he thinks that they're hurting her, so he's wants to protect her.
Right.
And that's another thing that was mentioned in some of those videos I checked out. Like the old perceptions of the gorillas is just like monsters that didn't have like thoughts or feelings, when we now know that is very much not the case. Like, they are very intelligent and they do have emotions like that. So I think that just kind of demonstrates like the fundamental not understandingness, for lack of a better word, of like what Denham was doing, just kind of caging up the thing,
Dustin, did you live here in Wisconsin when Samson was at the zoo? No. Okay, because we had a big gorilla at our Milwaukee County Zoo for many years, and he was beloved by many, many people that visited the zoo. So, in fact, there's things at our museum about him and everything. But it goes along to what you're saying about that they have a heart, and that that they are intelligent and everything. Samson became the icon for our zoo for many years, and lots of people, young and old, basically fell in love with him. He was a huge gorilla. I think they called, aren't the big ones like called razorbacks or something like that?
Overback?
Silverback, yeah. And it's just, I remember seeing him when I was younger at the zoo, and I actually thought of King Kong when I saw him the first time, because he was very big, very big. And I thought of it as like, oh, kind of like King Kong for real, But yeah, I think our Samson at the zoo made a lot of people realize the idea that they are intelligent and they do have a heart. Do you think he opened the doors for a lot of what people thought of gorillas and primates in general? So
Exactly.
I just didn't know, since you live here, if you had ever had a chance to actually see him at the zoo.
I've been trying to work at the zoo with my biology degree, but there's quite a lot of steps to getting that going.
Well,
I've only been here since 2015 too, so I'm less familiar with a lot of stuff at the zoo. Less familiar than I really should be. But it is a great zoo, and I really want to spend more time there.
I don't remember what year he died, but he's been gone for quite a long time now. So
Yeah, they used to actually have his skeleton in the old Milwaukee Museum. So I remember that.
Yeah, and I mentioned that. There's a big thing about him at the museum.
Used to be. I don't think they have it up any. Well, I haven't been back to the museum. They've moved the location now, so I haven't seen the new thing yet. But I get what you're saying.
I gotta go sometime too. I used to know the guy who was in charge of a lot of the collections in the research department. So he did some stuff at school while I was there.
But yeah, so we do. Did we get to the King Kong's escape then
We are
from
right
his
here.
shackles?
Like King
Okay,
Kong
so
and just goes on a rampage looking for Anne.
well, yeah, I think it was because of all the cameras and whatnot. They just unnerved him.
He was agitated, and he thought she was being threatened too. So there were kind of multiple factors there.
Right.
So,
Which, Dana was surprised, because after all, the chains were made of chrome steel. I mean, how could you possibly break them,
mhm.
Well, one of my favorite pieces of info from like old tiny times is just how like unbelievably stupid and like dim-witted a lot of so people who should have known better actually were on a lot of things. Like, for example, like before like the shark attacks in like 1912, where like a bunch of people were chewed up by a shark and died. Scientists genuinely did not think sharks could bite hard enough to sever limbs from humans. It's like, they really thought that, and it's like, are you kidding? I mean, it's easy to make jokes about like the medieval times where it's like, oh yeah, just rub this lead in your eyes; it'll cure what ails you. And science really wasn't that much better in that era.
Oh no, definitely not. It was better, but they were still lacking in a lot of areas. And I think I mentioned on here before, but Dustin, I can't remember if I mentioned to you, there is a book I read recently called Quackery: A Brief History of the Worst Ways to Cure Everything. And it's kind of painful to read and hilarious at the same time. Some of this stuff is like, there are a couple chapters I had trouble with, obviously, but yeah, some of the stuff people have done in the name of science or in the name of medicine is kind of like, really?
I mean, I used to play a lot of Assassin's Creed, and in Assassin's Creed 2, which takes place in like 14th century Florence, like there's a lot of just stuff on the street, and it's relatively well fleshed out. And I remember very vividly, like there are like plague doctors just kind of around, and sometimes if you're walking by, you can hear them like doing like their advertising speech. It's like, I have distilled an elixir of lead and pomegranate that will cure plague. And so whenever I think of quackery, I think of that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Lead, arsenic, mercury have all been taken to improve the health. And the book claims that I can't remember which is which exactly. I think mercury was involved with the deaths of both Mozart and George Washington. I believe they said that Lincoln had taken mercury. I want to say, it's well known that arsenic is considered to be one of the things that led to Napoleon's eventual decline, but I feel like I read that was hastened by, it might have been mercury again. Mercury was implicated in a lot of famous people dying through history. It's crazy.
It's pretty. Let's be real. It's pretty funny in retrospect. It's like, wow, for real.
Not to totally change the subject, but I did find out that Samson died in 1981. So yeah, you probably wouldn't have had a chance to see him.
I wasn't born for like almost 10 years. Yeah.
But yeah, he was 32 years old, which I guess was pretty good age. They said he died of a heart attack. But yeah, it just was an interesting thing because he was like a phenomenon for here in Wisconsin, and him being at our zoo,
Yeah. That's cool. He had notoriety and got to live for a while. So.
But if you have funny pictures of him, he is massive. He was big.
Well, gorilla's a pretty big animal, just in general.
You'll have to look him up sometime, and you'll see what I mean.
I will.
He was very, very massive. But anyways, so it's The Great Escape, and he's just he's so you feel bad for him. I think even at this time already, you took him. We took him from his home, the only home he's ever known, put him in these surroundings that I think would make any even even if you would have brought one of the natives here from their surroundings would be going crazy with all the hustle and the bustle and the vehicles and the people and the everything. Just imagine if you as a human had never seen anything like this, and he's an animal. He's confused. He's angry. He's looking for her because he's trying to protect her, and we as a naive society, which we still are in some aspects, all we want to do is kill him.
Yeah.
They're nobody is looking out for him. Nobody's thinking of him.
Yeah.
It's just let's just kill him.
Yeah. It's like, never mind that if it weren't for Denim, he would never have been an issue to anyone except the natives of that island. Basically, at the end of the film, Denim is the big villain of the film, because at the end of the film, that island community has basically been destroyed. Most of the entire ship's crew is lost. Several people in New York are dead. And not to mention that Kong himself, first of all, killed several other creatures to protect an interloper, but also ends up dying. So we have basically a callous disregard for life and an obsession with fame and profit have led to all this death and destruction. And as far as we know, he walks away at the end. He even gets the final line. He even gets to send us all out with this great pithy line. And he gets away with it. And it's like, okay, well, that's interesting.
I kind of wish that I think I might have seen this. I think I saw this in some parody from somewhere. I can't remember where it was, but like he delivers the line like, "For his beauty killed the beast," and somebody just turns to him like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I wanted that to happen personally.
Right.
And like kind of bullshit that he just gets away with all this stuff that he really. It seems like he's going to get in trouble for it, and then he just like drops the line, and people are like, "Oh, yeah," and then it's like, "Hey, wait a minute, shouldn't we be arresting you?" Like it's kind of an odd place to end the film, but it still works.
Yes.
But it is sad though, because Kong himself is not out to. He's not out to kill people and to do this or do
Yeah.
that. Just you
Right.
put him in this situation, and he's reacting. This is a reaction. And he ends
Oh
up
yeah.
paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just an example. It's a thrilling cinematic illustration of what unfortunately is one of the calling cards of humans throughout history. We see something that we perceive as a threat and we kill it without question. And Kong would definitely qualify as the so-called megafauna. And there is evidence that most of the world's megafauna was killed by humans because we saw it as threatening. And in most cases, there's no other reason. So it's like there's also evidence that has completely screwed up the balance of the planet. But
Yeah.
yeah. Just like Kong was keeping balance on his island, he was keeping everyone in check. Now that he's gone, who knows what'll happen to what's left on the island?
Indeed.
Oh yeah. So I believe that we're pretty much at the end of the film, are we not?
Well, I mean, he fell off the building after the famous plane sequence where, he climbs the Empire State Building, and I have a hard time believing that people don't know about this scene, but that's how it ends. He carries on to the top of the Empire State Building, and they're like, I think Denham has the idea, hey, let's use planes, and they basically shoot him off the building with planes, and he falls pretty far and dies on impact, and that's really it. The movie cuts to the credits right after that Denham line. There's really no moment of reflection or anything. And in one of those videos I saw earlier this week, something I thought was kind of fun that I did not notice about Kong Skull Island was that Kong still they find a way for Kong to still break out of chains and for Kong to knock down a bunch of aircraft. If you guys have seen that, that's they did do that, and I didn't catch that callback to the original King Kong until somebody told me about it, and I was like, oh crap, that's right. Because he knocks down all those helicopters that are attacking him, and in one of the battles, he gets tangled up in some chains in this ship graveyard. So that was just a fun kind of thing that had been pointed out. I thought it was worth mentioning.
Well, they may have said beauty killed the beast, but I say it's a bunch of airplanes. And a very long fall off the Empire State.
I was going to say gravity and pavement.
Well, it could have been a very beautiful piece of pavement.
I was going to say, very stupid people.
Oh yeah, that too.
It was pavement killed the beast. It just doesn't sound as right.
Yeah, doesn't have quite the same ring.
Poetic, yeah.
I've been lucky enough to have been on top of the Empire State Building, and I could definitely say that would be a fall I would not want to be dealing with.
So what do you guys feel for Kong as he's on the Empire State Building and the planes are shooting him and everything else?
Yeah.
Do you feel feel bad for him?
Kong is definitely a sympathetic character, no doubt.
I mean, he's still pulling people out of their windows and tossing them. Like I didn't approve of that, but I was a little surprised to see that in this. I didn't remember he did that, and I was like, "Oh man, come on."
I do have to mention something that I mentioned in the chat that I found very amusing about this. Kong and several of the dinosaurs seem to they see people and they think, "Ooh, snack," and then they, without exception, spit them back out. I don't think I saw anyone swallow in this movie, and so it's kind of like, well, I guess they're trying to make the point that humans taste bad. It's like, I don't know.
Here in wildlife, sometimes that
Yeah.
predators don't like the taste of human.
Oh shoot! Even sharks tend to not bother with us unless they got nothing else to hunt. They'll taste us and then be like, "Nah," and move on.
It's just the way, and I realized some of this was the effect of the animation and the fact that they, you can only get but so realistic or so much nuance or whatever. But it just really looks like petulant kids saying, "Oh, I don't want that." It's so amusing. I found that funny.
Like the goal is to maim rather than feed. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's like they look like they're genuinely tasting and going, "Ugh."
Yeah. Let's go ahead and move on to special effects.
Definitely.
'Cause, yeah, I'm looking at the time.
What we said about the effects and how they're just like a triumph of the time, really. And
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think some pieces of the original Kong construction are still exist. Not a lot of the covering because that's rotted away, but a lot of the framework still has it there. And that was a complex piece of machinery. And stop motion, though it was used before this, still that was a marvel. I mean, I can imagine being in 1933 going in there and seeing that and going, "Oh my gosh, look at them. They're moving. The dinosaurs are moving." Which they may have seen it once or twice before, but most people probably would be seeing stuff like that to those level of effects for the first time.
And again, the sheer level of work that goes into stop motion, having to move each piece just a bit and then take a shot and do another and take a shot and then edit it all together. I mean, it's a phenomenal that anyone gets it done, let alone turns it into a good movie. So yeah, props on that.
I think the first concept of this way of filming is started out basically in cartoons, because a cartoon is basically the same thing, only it's on paper. Each movement of a cartoon is another drawing.
Right. In early animation, definitely, yeah, there's a lot of similarity there. And this was also probably one of the early use of, I'm not so sure we could use the term green screen, but they definitely were editing different things.
Like foreground, background stuff.
Background, yeah. And you can see the cuts. There's like a halo around the figures in a lot of scenes. But again, given what they were working with at the time, it's still impressive.
Oh yeah, I mean it is impressive. I remember when we were doing our when we did our discussion of L'Inferno. It was a little bit ago, but I mean it's amazing what creativity people were doing when they did not have the technology at their disposal like today. So, I mean, it is amazing to see practical effects are, if anything, creative and innovative. I mean, I think some of the first animatronics being used were used on this. So,
yep. And I remember going to Universal Studios Florida and riding the King Kong ride, and they used some of the animatronics that they did when there was an animatronic, head type thing in the ride. So that was kind of cool. So I just wanted to bring that up. But I agree. The amount of creativity that went into this at the time and making it look like a screen behind them was a monster attacking them was phenomenal at the time. And it was a movie trick, that people of the 30s had never seen before. So when it hadn't been seen before and it wasn't part of a trope that someone heard about, or this and that like us are seeing it years later, and realizing, okay, yeah, they cheated and used a screen or
Well, I
that
mean,
that nature.
you gotta remember this is like the
It was
very beginning of this stuff too. So I mean, like remember like just a few years before this, I think like the thing with the train. Remember that they played like a footage of a train coming towards the screen, and everybody like jumped out of the way.
Yeah.
I gotta think a lot of people were still kind of on that, you know.
Well, a lot of them
Like,
were new to
anything like it.
I mean, a lot of them were new to many different things. And honestly, to go to the theater was an expensive thing for people to do for a time. But that being said,
Well, part of the reason I picked this movie was because of the production, because it was something that was so new and everything, and we were movies, and I thought this totally fit because of everything, not just the age, but of everything that was new in this movie. It was, you know, the production, I think, in this is just phenomenal because there were so many new things that came out with this movie, that people had not seen before.
Right.
So that's my take on the production.
yeah, it was a phenomenal production for its time. So moving on to music. I know it's not like it has a soundtrack as the movies of this day, but it definitely had a score.
And this was one of the first films that actually had a score. Like there were movies before they had music that was used, but a lot of times it was just kind of incidental music, whatever was played with the performance. There were a few films that had music on the soundtrack, but this was one of the first ones where they actually put music on the soundtrack.
Like music written for the movie too.
Exactly.
Because I think it was Dracula that had just some random ass like Swan Lake thing or whatever that didn't fit the film really at all. It was just kind of like, what is this?
And Max Steiner was the composer behind the music for King Kong. He had composed behind Casablanca, Gone with the Wind. He was part of the music department there. He was part of the music department of the Treasure of the Sierra Nevada. He was the composer behind Arsenic and Old Lace. He's definitely of the genre of filmmaking that
a real interesting thing about the music is that I can't think of a single piece of it right now. Like it doesn't come to mind when I try to think of music from King Kong, but when you hear it, you immediately are like, oh, that's from King Kong. Like it's very distinctive as a movie.
It is. I agree. It's not often that you get a movie where you can be like, that came from there, or that came from there. But around this time, it was it was an interesting achievement to have under your belt and be remembered and known for. So I think Max Steiner definitely did a good job for the film. Anyone else have any thoughts on the music?
Yeah, I think it's great for something that is one of the firsts. Like I said, this movie was a pioneer in its field in many ways. And a lot of people don't think of it like that nowadays because they look at it like they would, like, why aren't the special effects as good as they are now? Why isn't but if you think about it back then, it is probably one of those things that would have blown people away when they watched it. It is too bad that I cannot go back and experience these films as a crowd would back in the day. I swear it would be a very different experience.
Definitely.
That's just
So,
making
Tammy,
me think. Has anyone seen the pictures from like the premiere of Alien, like from during the chestburster scene, where everyone in the audience is just like, there's just like looks of like terror on everybody, except there's one guy in the back with beard who's just like smiling like this. Like, hell yeah. It's like I feel like that guy could maybe have been like a time traveler or something. And just like watching the audience through the movie, it's like, yeah, get him.
Oh, that guy had a steady diet of Herschel Gordon Lewis before he came in there.
A lot of people were odd when they saw Jurassic Park for the first time, because that, I thought, the technology they used at the time to make the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, I think at that time that was as real as you could get at that time.
Jurassic Park is one of the few examples of where old CG can still hold up for the most part, and they did an amazing job with that.
Pretty ironclad on the first Jurassic Park too, because of how frequently they still used animatronics too. Like they used the CG just to like bridge certain sequences, and plus a lot of it being like really dark at night. I think that all kind of works together to get that effect.
Yeah, Spielberg's a good example of someone who you can watch his evolution as a filmmaker using the effects of the time, and he hasn't always had complete control over those effects. When he's hit like Jurassic Park, it's just wonderful, and it stands the test of time. Jaws looks a little clunky nowadays, but the story is more important than, and he wisely decided to tone down the effects because they were such a problem. But on movies where he got carried away with the effects, like I think Ready Player One would have been a better movie if he didn't get carried away with the effects. And I guarantee you, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull would have been a better movie if he hadn't gotten carried away with the effects. So, there are times where, he's an interesting case study for that.
Kind of a get out of your own way sort of thing.
Sometimes, yeah, because everyone knows he's just a huge nerd. He's just a huge movie nerd, and he loves playing with the toys. And sometimes, Tim Burton's kind of like that too. He gets carried away with his ideas, and sometimes forgets he needs to rein them in a little bit.
Alrighty, so I guess let's go into our favorite scenes and our favorite characters. So, Brandon, what would be your favorite scene and our favorite character?
Hmm.
What would be your favorite scene and our favorite character, Brandon?
Oh, well, my favorite scene is probably I guess the ending. I do love that whole battle with the airplanes. As far as favorite character, I'll go with Kong. He's the good guy.
Okay. Heading over to you, Dustin. Why don't you tell us favorite scene and our favorite character? Or were you not done, Brandon?
That's it.
Okay. Dustin.
I think favorite scene would have to be the T-Rex battle, which I don't think I really appreciated very much. Just because it's like the two models like fighting, and it still looks pretty believable. Like, even though you can tell it's like stop motion now, like at the time that probably melted people's brains. And it's a pretty cool sequence, and it's been homaged like many times in later Kong movies. He like breaks the Venatosaurus jaw in like the Peter Jackson King Kong, and like during some of his fights with Godzilla in like the more recent like crossovers. So that's a pretty cool scene. And in terms of favorite, I'm not sure. I get spammed in the chat. And in terms of favorite character, I don't know if I really necessarily have a favorite character in this. I mean, I feel like I could just be like, yeah, Kong, sure, because he's really, most of the characters in this movie don't have a lot of depth to them. Especially like Jack as compared to the Peter Jackson King Kong. He's really just kind of, the blank slate hero who goes and like rescues Anne. I mean, yeah, he's got some personality on the ship. He's kind of a jerk, but there's really not a whole lot to anybody here, except like you can tell right away like Carl Denham is like sleazy and amoral, because that's basically how everybody talks about him like right from the start. And then with that story, it's like, oh yeah, I don't bring a cameraman anymore. Like I do it myself. So I was in Africa. I could have got some great footage of a charging rhino, but the cameraman ran instead of trusting me to shoot the rhino. And it's like, wait a minute. So, I mean, I guess I could maybe say Carl Denham, because he really drives this whole thing along. And does have like a distinctive personality. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's fine.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Jake. Favorite scene and our favorite characters.
Part of me wants to say that final sequence is got to be at the top, because it's so iconic and so memorable. But I'm not 100% sure if it is a favorite. I kind of agree with Dustin that one scene was pretty interesting, the Kong versus the large predatory dinosaur. So I don't know if I have a clear favorite, but that final scene and the final line definitely works well enough as a choice. As far as favorite characters, I kind of also agree with the idea that some of the characters lack depth. I wouldn't say that they all lack depth, but Anne and Jack are pretty generic. They're easy to root for and easy to like, and Anne in particular is a very likable character. I'd be tempted to put her as a favorite, and I can't pick Carl because he is such a rotten he pretty much is a stand-in for everything wrong with humans, and but he presents it in such an entertaining package. Like, he's definitely a villain I can't stand, but but the kind you love to hate. You know what I mean? So if I had to just say a favorite, I probably would go with Kong because he is basically the innocent in the story. Um, but I don't think there's anyone that fits a traditional favorite role in this one.
Okay. What about you, Tammy?
Well, of course, I'm going with the King Kong as my favorite, because, you know, yeah, he, you went from at the beginning thinking that he's this, you know, big bad monster. And, he's just out to destroy everybody and everything, and he really isn't. Like we said, he kept basically law and order in where he was from. You know, he kept everything in sync. Everybody, everything flowed the way it was supposed to. And then we took him out of his element and brought him here. And you don't think he's not supposed to have a reaction, you know? So we realize that he is not the villain in the end. And, we all think, I think most people after watching this movie are going to have feelings for King Kong. If you don't, well, I don't understand why you wouldn't. But favorite scenes, I guess I'd have to say basically once he's brought back here and he breaks loose and up until the end that whole thing, because there's so much that happens, and here and everything. It's just and you think back on it now as the what all they had to incorporate to make that moment from when he broke loose to the very end of the movie. It took probably quite a bit of ingenuity and thought and imagination and everything else to make that part of the movie even happen. You know, it's not like they just were shooting him walking down the street. There was a lot involved to make all of that stuff happen. So it's like a mixture of scenes, I guess you would say, is my favorite scene.
Okay. Are you done then?
Yeah.
Alrighty. And I guess my favorite character is Fay Ray's character. That and my favorite scene is when he's actually filming her, because I think that's a great moment of showing how an actress can react to scenes, and a very early one to caught on film as well. So to me, that's one of my favorite scenes. But as far as King Kong goes, I think my favorite scene would probably be when he actually went on the rampage. Um, Even though I know they still had him like be the monster, uh, somebody had to be a villain, even though they were trying to show that. Uh, I think that there were early signs of humanity inside Kong in this early film. So I feel like they were trying to somewhat pit her against him. And although I feel like she did a hell of a lot more screaming than she had to, I still feel like there was some kind of bond that they were trying to build between those two. But and of course the ending comment that was memorable. So other than that, did anyone else have anything else to add?
I did want to mention the kind of coming back to a couple things I've said, but it just occurred to me. I've seen a couple of interesting lists lately, and one was a list where he said, like, I think it was monster movies where the worst monster was actually an ordinary person or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it was worded. But basically, like monster movies where the monster is not the main villain. And I don't remember if King Kong was on the list, but it should have been. It's a really good example of that idea. I can't remember if it was on that list or not. But
King Kong only became a monster once he was brought out of his element. I mean,
right.
If we wouldn't have fucked with him or left him where he was, it probably wouldn't have happened.
You're out of your element. Yeah. And then Dave, you had puzzled me when you talked about breaking the fourth wall earlier, but then you came back to that scene. And I think another way I would put it is that this is probably one of the earlier films that actually comments on Hollywood and the filmmaking process. Like,
correct.
I wouldn't call that's not really breaking the fourth wall per se, but in terms of offering meta commentary on the business, it is one of the early films that does that. And I give them props for the way that they do it. I think that is one of the more interesting aspects of the movie, I think.
Yeah. I agree. But did anyone else have any comments they wanted to put forward? Alrighty. 'Tis beauty that killed the beast. That being said, let's go around and tell everyone a little bit about who we are, whatnot. So let's start with you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, I'm Kotobukijake. I'm the sometime co-host of SeptumSin versus the World. And generally speaking, I just, keep busy doing whatever I can fit into my day. I have been, I work full time, but also lately have really been trying to get some work done to prepare for the upcoming Versus Awards for the 2023. I think we've got just a couple of months left before nominations are due, and for various reasons, I've been in and out of being in a film viewing mode. Have had trouble doing it over the last year for various reasons, but the last couple weeks I have really buckled down and gotten quite a few knocked out, actually, and seen some really good stuff and some less interesting stuff. But yeah, but even so, I always still find a little bit of time to watch some stuff for this group. It's always fun to come out and talk movies with people, and like I said, certainly happy to give this one another chance to take a look at it. Maybe one day I'll get around to actually watching the bonus features on my copy, but that didn't happen this time. But yep. And one day I would like to pair this with the Peter Jackson film and do like a twofer. It just has not happened, but we'll need to cover that eventually. It's a good movie in its own right, but and I never have seen the one from the 70s that was alluded to earlier, so maybe potential future ideas, I guess. But that'll do for me for this go around.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Dustin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I used to collect horror movies and horror memorabilia here in Milwaukee. I have a YouTube channel, The Crypt of Horrors, for showing off the things I would find. It's been a long time since I've been able to afford to collect anything, though, so the channel is kind of stalled. And just attempts to make more content have just run into all kinds of walls. But I'm not giving up, and hopefully we have new stuff over there moderately soon. But yeah, go subscribe to the Crypto Horrors, and I will be back as soon as I'm able. So I have an Instagram by the same name where I show off my horror stuff as well, the Crypto Horrors, and I am Dur Cryptaxis on Twitter. So I'm trying to get my name changed to Cryptaxis on the other site so that it's easier to find, because it seems like my name is a little long for search engines. So yeah, give me a follow in all those places. And I'm going to say goodnight because I got to log off. And yeah, bye, everyone. Hope you had a good time.
Alrighty. Right.
Good night.
Heading over to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I have a channel that's kind of not doing anything at the moment, but we are going to have an anime discussion, not this week, but next week on Servant Service, which is going to be a fun anime discussion on the channel. Working on the last couple episodes of Tabletop Horror Season 1, which will be good. And, of course, Buy My Movie, Amityville webcam. You can get it, and the Shackle Demon Project, and Boris's bonus disc on in the link below. So, have some fun stuff. See a movie that has most of us in it. It's going to be fun. Otherwise, I figure that you can get back to Jake to introduce the next week's film. Once you're done, Dave.
Yep. I'm definitely going to go over to Tammy and get a little bit about who she is first.
David's fiance and I go on this channel and another one and talk about movies with everybody and get their point of view and get to learn about different ones I haven't seen, some I have seen, and it makes for a lot of fun to get everybody's ideas. And I have a collection of my own, and other than that, just looking forward to the nice weather, being able to bring out my car.
Alrighty. Heading and my name is David Striggy. I'm one of the. I'm gonna get to you, Jake, in a moment to tell us the movie for next week. But my name is David Striggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us for this fantabulous journey that we've been having. I think we've been having a blast, and hopefully you've enjoyed our discussion on King Kong. Let us know down in the comments what you thought of the movie, what you thought of our discussion, and definitely follow along with us. We'll be telling you what movie is in store in a moment here. But I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we also podcast on Sundays. And I believe we are going to be going on about Greece this Sunday. So it's going to be interesting. Yeah, definitely check out both of our channels. But I also do some video pickups and some video reviews from time to time. I do some gameplay if you want to check some of that out. Just recently got the Tales of the Forgotten Crest and copied and checked it out a couple of weeks ago, and just beginning to start to send out to all the people involved, and then I'll probably be back with a release date for the film eventually to the general public after I do all of that, which might take a couple of weeks here, but exciting stuff. So Jake, why don't you tell us what movie is coming up next week?
Alrighty, we are going to be looking at a 1938 film directed by Michael Curtiz called Angels with Dirty Faces, which is a very important movie, if only because it is the one that inspired the movie within a movie in Home Alone, Angels with Filthy Souls. But it also features a pretty impressive lineup, including George Bancroft, Ann Sheridan, Pat O'Brien, and at the top of the chart, Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney. So, should be a pretty interesting film that is. I accidentally broke my usual rule and put forward a movie that I have not seen before, so I'll look forward to watching that one for next week's discussion.
Alrighty. So on that note, everyone say good night.
Good night, everyone.
Oh, I actually found the clip from one of the best ending lines ever. I'm going to play this.
Okay.
I'm afraid God is sending us all a message. If you can't take a joke, go fuck yourself.
Good times. I don't know if they would have gotten away with that in 1933, but you know.